Our latest Supersonic Superstars contest is happening now, and we're giving away $2 million and other cash bonuses. To help set up your game for success, I'm sitting down with Nadav Ashkenazy, SVP Supersonic, to discuss best practices, tips and tricks, and examples from other super successful games to help you create a winning game concept. Nadav, thank you for taking the time.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
I'm happy to be here.
So tell me, how can a $1 million question, or maybe many $1 million questions, how can developers come up with marketable concepts?
Yeah, so of course there is no the right equation together, right? It involves creativity, some element of luck, etc. But there are things you can follow that will increase the chances that you will find something that is marketable. And in general, I would say that developers need to stick to topics or themes or anything that speaks to a big audience, right? So it can be sometimes ideas that you see on social networks that you know and you see high engagement with them, either on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or whatsoever. If you see something that people engage with, you can assume that it speaks, that it's interesting for a big audience out there, and you can go in this direction. It can be experiences from real life that seems marketable or engaging. For instance, one of our games, Color Match, actually was inspired by educational activity of mixing colors and getting to the color, and it was adopted by many different schools and generated a big buzz, and he said, okay, this seems something that is engaging with a lot. Let's see how will it work as a game. Can we gamify it? And the chances that you will see good marketability is strong. And of course, it's super important to remain close to the current market, to data, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel from scratch every time. You need to follow what is hot today, what is in the top charts. You can look and get inspired by other games, not in a sense of cloning them, but understanding what speaks today for many users and players out there, and then to get a better sense on what and where you should aim to. So it's a mix of staying close to the market, open your eyes, look at social networks, real life examples everywhere, and think about concepts that will speak to a broad audience, because marketability is the size of the audience that is going to be interested in your game. And this is a very key element in hyper-casual, of course.
And what do you think are some of the key elements that a successful or promising prototype needs to have?
Yeah, so in general, for every game, by the way, not only hyper-casual, the end goal, or what dictates the entire flow, is whether we'll manage to get to a place where the LTV is bigger than the CPI on scale, right? This is how you make profit for any game. And what we try to do in the prototyping phase is to try and predict as early as possible whether we are going in this direction. It's not 100% perfect, and it will never be. But on the other hand, to spend months of development and only then discover that your game is not going to be LTV CPI positive, it's a bigger of a pain. So what a promising prototype needs to have is to show signs that the CPI on scale is going to be lower than the LTV. What does it mean? It means that it has strong marketability. Strong marketability is what will allow the CPI to remain low for a long period and allow us to have a very strong gap between the CPI and LTV, and strong engagement by the users with the game. Retention, time played every day, cumulated time played over a week or 2 weeks or a month. These are the signals that we are looking for. Usually we always start with the marketability side, because we always recommend, because it's very hard to nail the marketability side. And this is why we recommend all of our developers to build very lean MVPs in order not to waste too much time on something that is likely not to succeed in every individual shot. So it's very hard to understand and to analyze the engagement with the game, because it usually have 5 levels. So of course retention and playtime are not going to be high. You can see the indication, but it's very early. So we'll usually look at marketability side, and by the way, predicting marketability sounds easy, right? But it's so complex because 4 years ago it was all about, hey, I'm uploading the game to Facebook, and if the CPI is lower than 25 cents, it's going to be marketable. We don't feel that this is the case anymore. We see games that had initial CPI of 20 cents and eventually were not marketable. It was a very, very limited and small audience that this game was marketable to, and other games that looks less promising in the beginning and became mega hits down the road. So we understood that probably this is one of the biggest challenges in hyper casual world. How can you predict whether this game is going to be marketable or not? And what we built in the past year is a very, very sophisticated marketability predictor that is way beyond what we did as an industry a couple of years ago. Today we are of course running on 3 different channels. It be a mix of Facebook, for instance, TikTok, and aerosols, which is new, right? Unlike the previous methodology of testing only on one channel, on usually Facebook. We are looking not only at the CPI. We understand that CPI tells part of the story. We look at gender split, on ages split, of course cohorted, not individually. We're looking at placement split. We're looking at IPM of SDK networks and the distribution of IPM among other top hyper-casual games, and eventually we take everything into account and give this prototype a marketability score based on the data that we have in this phase. Then if we keep working on the game, we look at the creative win rate to understand whether we are able to create more creatives that wins the initial creative. So every time we're challenging what is the marketability potential from one end, and of course the retention, playtime, and a new KPI that we invented, Apapu, which is a mix of retention and playtime, and it looks on a cohort level how much cumulated they play the game over a week. And we feel that for ad-based business, this is a very, very good indication for the LTV, because eventually as the player plays more along the week, you'll have more ads being shown and more revenue being generated. So this is the main 2 things that we are looking at when evaluating prototype.
You talked a little bit about how tough it is to sort of succeed with one shot, right? With one prototype or with one concept. How important is it for a studio to come up with sort of different concepts?
So I would say, first of all, fail quick, fail cheap, and test as many prototypes as you can is the right solution for any small chance business, right? Whether it's hitting marketability of a prototype or coming up with a startup or whatsoever. So of course that for every studio, try as many as possible. It will increase the probability that you'll find your diamond, your gem down the road. The question is to try what, right? Whether we should try a specific type of hyper casual game, let's say runner, or should we try runners, idle, puzzles, and I don't think that there is a good answer. It really depends on the studios. We see that some studios that have specific skill set are very, very good on focusing on specific genre, now trying many different themes, many different mechanics until they find it. We have example of Power, which is one of our developers, which published with us Move People, and it was a great success. And then he took the same mechanic. He didn't go to a different subgenre. Now let's try. It was a simulation game. Now let's try a puzzle or a runner. He said, okay, I'm good. I already have good infra. I'm already good in execution in this world. Let's try different themes. Then he went to the animals theme, and again we saw good KPIs and published him another game, Move Animals, based on the initial game. On the other hand, we have a Carlton, for instance, which published already 4 games with us. It's one person from the US, and every game is very, very different. He had one runner with us, one puzzle with us, one ASMR with us, so it's very, very different. And for him, it's more about the creativity. It's very, very easy for him to test different subgenres, and he always finds a creative idea on each subgenre. So it really depends on what the studio feel convenient with, and the studio skills. Because again, ASMR will need very high level art skills. Puzzle will need very, very high level of creativity and problem solving skills. So if you're skilled in many things, why not? You have wider area to try. If not, focus on what you're good at and try there as many concepts as possible.
So continuing on the trend of kind of being a little bit more, looking at specific examples, let's take Grabmaster. So one of the adjustments made there was to add a voiceover, a little bit more polish. How common is it to sort of start incorporating elements like that from sort of, let's call it other or more regular game genres? And how sort of frequently does it positively impact CPI?
Yeah, so great question. So in general, I would divide the answer into two phases. The initial phase of the prototyping, it's the phase where we are still trying to evaluate whether this game is going to have a promising profit or not, and whether we should keep invest on it. In this phase, we wouldn't recommend to try such advanced features because we understand their impact is limited, and we try to understand the core gameplay, how marketable is it from one end, on how sticky is it when you play it from the other hand. So we try to stay focused on the core gameplay of the game, and this is what we do in this phase. We are not doing voiceover and many advanced things there. Once the game proved himself and we understand the core gameplay is good, is marketable, then on the publishing phase where we are growing the game and generating profit, there we try many things. We try voiceover, we try different type of creatives, add-ons, many different things, and once we see something working, we iterate upon that and adding more of these creatives. So for the second phase, it's definitely very relevant and interesting, but I would stay away from this in the first phase, because if a very initial prototype needs voiceover in order to get good marketability, it's a bad sign. We want the core mechanic, the core gameplay to be marketable, and this is what will promise the future success.
There are arguably sort of like two kinds of hyper-casual games. Those sort of like short-term hits designed for very quick monetization, and then those that are kind of built for long-term success. Why do you think the industry's evolved in this way?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it happens also outside of the hyper-casual industry, right? It's true for all gaming, it's true for other type of entertainments, right? For movies, you still have movies that people watch for 30 years, and some that are nice in the first year, and this is it. And I think it's a mix of a few things. First of all, how relevant the concept remains over time. Some games are trying to nail a very hot trend currently that might be less relevant in a year. And how strong the engagement and late retention of the users with the game. We all understand that a game that succeeds mainly because it has a very strong marketability will not be a long-term hit. Because after a while, after you acquire 20, 40, 100, 200 million users, the CPI gets expensive, right? You acquire the cheap users, and this is it. And in order to remain scale over time, the LTV needs to be solid. The late retention needs to be solid. And by the way, we don't look for it for the very first phase, because in the first few months, the CPI will be amazing, so we can live with the lower LTV. But this is where the execution of the studio comes along as well. The game is growing. Studio that wants this game to be a long-term hit needs to keep working it, keep improving it, keep pushing the game, keep adding content, keep adding meta, keep adding interesting features within the game to improve the late retention, for users to come back, for the LTV to be higher. So even once the CPI will start climbing, and it will happen for every game after you acquire X amount of users, you can still increase the CPI, keep users flowing in, and stay positive in terms of profit, because the game is strong. So I would say that for almost all of our long-term hits, you can see a very strong LTV, a very strong late retention, sometimes even after 180 days, and more than that, which in the past people say hyper-casual is for 7 days. Many of our long-term hits are being played for 6 months or a year after the same cohort played for that long, and this is a key element to build a long-term hit.
Thank you very much, Nadav. Hopefully the stuff you've talked about today will help all of the audience watching today, and for anyone submitting their game to Superstars, best of luck.
Good luck, guys.